Hi, I am Viviana Weekes-Shackelford, and this is Darwinian Diva. I'm so excited to share with you what this podcast is about, and I'm just so excited that it's finally off the ground. I am an evolutionary psychologist, a feminist, and a science advocate. So I think we've all asked questions like, why do males and females differ in so many ways? Why are they similar in different ways? And why do we see these differences in very young children? And are children born this way, or do parents raise them that way, right? And do we give parents, all the glory when they do great things and blame biology when they do bad things? It's that line of questioning that sort of encouraged me to pursue a degree in psychology, to understand better how human nature works, and to get some of those questions answered. Well, it's been a little bit since the beginning of that quest. I did obtain a PhD, a husband and 4 children, and I also made a trek 1,000 miles away from my hometown, Miami and Fort Lauderdale area. And at this point, I'd love to give a shout out to my home, 305 and 954 respectively. I think one of the most important things that I obtained along the way is a perspective, a way of thinking about life, a way of asking questions in a way that I think is very stimulating and, fun, makes science a fun thing to explore. So this scientific exploration led to some deep passions here, and sort of prompted me, with this aha moment, like, wait a second, you teach in a classroom, you engage with academics, whether it's, through conferences or in writing, all within the confines and the hard walls of academia. But given the access that we have to broader audiences, I thought, well, why not share this passion with a broader audience, to excite and engage and empower a larger audience, to reinvigorate those who are already on this scientific exploration train, whether it's academics or graduate students or undergraduate students or curious minds, right? To also lure newbies, right, that are looking for a new way of thinking about topics that we already think about, from romantic relationships to parent-child relationships, from birth control to sexual control, from the foods that satiate us to the thoughts that stimulate us. I've got one more. From working and stay-at-home moms to working and stay-at-home daddies. I am Darwinian Diva. So today is March 4th, Wednesday, and we are recording on Darwinian Diva. And today we have Zach Sundin.
What up, Doe?
Who is also Darwinian Diva's executive producer.
Yeah.
So we're getting some information from behind the scenes to the
people. We're taking you back behind the curtain in the pilot episode of the Diva, so that we can talk with you all about what we're doing, goals, what this experience is really supposed to be, what we're hoping it's going to be. So yeah, we're excited to get talking with you about this.
So one of the things I did earlier in the monologue, I gave you just some direction as to my perspective on what this project is, and so we thought having Zach on here, will give you a little more insight from his perspective on what the podcast is about. So thanks for doing this.
Yeah, you're welcome. That's what we're here for.
Okay, so part of my motivation for the podcast is to excite, engage, and empower people, right? So in regards to science, of course, right? And I have a biased perspective, and that is of an evolutionary perspective, which you also have.
True.
And so I thought it might be fun to let listeners and viewers know why you decided to become a part of this project.
Yeah, so I got involved with this when you came to me with the idea, like, hey, I think I want to do a podcast. Like, everyone's starting to do them, but there aren't that
Everyone
many
has
people.
One.
Yeah, a lot of people, where everyone will even just talk about, like, man, it'd be so fun to have a podcast. Right. And I was like, I think I can actually help you with that, because with my bands in the past, we've done self-recordings for demos and things. So I have some experience with audio recording, audio engineering, that kind of stuff. And it was like, okay, I think if we put together your expertise in your field, me as the come up position in the field of EP, and then having some background in audio, then it was like, okay, we can marry these two things together to come up with a podcast. And
we might just be able to pull this off.
yeah, I mean, we're trying out here. We're learning as we go. And so I wanted to do this because I wanted to show more people what evolutionary psychology is. I mean, when I was applying to graduate school about 2 years ago now, I had no idea what it was.
Right.
Like, I had zero idea. I was applying for social psych programs around the country, and then I stumbled into evolutionary psychology by chance and was just like, oh my God, this is awesome. How did you
stumble into it?
I found some sort of article, and I don't remember what it was. Okay. I think it was a David Buss article, which would make sense because he's got so many citations. Right. I think it was something like I was reading one, and then it was on like a suggested article on the side. I was like, oh, that sounds neat. Like, let's check this out. And then it had the phrase evolutionary psychology, and immediately I was like, what is that? Like, that sounds cool. And so then I started digging into it and found that I really enjoyed it. But so going from that story of how it could affect others is I'm hoping that this podcast makes it a little easier for people to find EP, right, and just to have access to it when they wouldn't normally, and it wouldn't be available to them because it's not that big of a field.
So how do you think, and this is a question that I struggle with myself, but how do you think it might be beneficial? So why should people care about what evolutionary psychology is? And just because it took you hook, line, and sinker, doesn't mean it's going to take someone. I mean, it took me too.
Yeah, but it's not going to hook everyone. Yeah. I mean, evolution by natural selection is something that a number of people struggle with. Right. Even those who come on and join our side, as you might say, and become hooked and really take it as their real truth, because it is. This is not just we get to decide it's the truth, everyone. This is, to the best of our knowledge, the way the world works as a science. And so even as you're going along, there are a lot of moments of struggle saying, like, this is a very complex phenomena. Right. The way that the world is organized without purpose, it's a big idea. It's hard to handle. And so I think that, once you get more and more people to begin thinking about it, then they're going to eventually come to the conclusion that this is the way to think about things, because logically you'll get there. Now, there can be emotional hangups along the way, but if you just get to the bare bones logic, you'll find that this is the way you should be thinking about things. So that's why I want to bring it to people. Yeah.
I also think that just providing this sort of information stimulates questions, and a lot of, the most insightful and profound research starts with a stupid question, and so I think that this kind of thing stimulates that sort of thinking and questions that actually contribute to that cycle of science.
Yeah, and I think the idea with this podcast is we want to make everyone start asking questions. Yeah. It doesn't matter whether you've been entrenched in psychology for the past 50 years, or you're a high school student who finds this online, maybe on YouTube, and is like, oh, that's pretty neat. I think that's something I'd like to, dive down the rabbit hole of YouTube further, to be like, oh yeah, there are these TED Talks or these papers or things that will keep on building questions for them. Right. And so specifically with young people, because I'm reading your mind here. Yes. I can see you giving me the look of like, well,
we need to get on to younger people.
Yeah, right. And so it's like, so with younger people, I think
younger meaning,
well, so I'm 25.
Generation Alpha?
Yeah. Frankly, it can be anyone. Yeah. Whether it's millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, whatever the hell generation we're going to get. How do you
keep that in order? Like, do you actually know
the
birth
I know?
years
So
or what the cohort
No,
is?
like I know I'm toward the end of millennials. Okay. So I'm right at the tail end of millennials into Gen Z.
So you're one of those.
Yeah, and I I guess you'd say, identify more with millennials than Gen Z. Like, I don't do TikTok, for those of you young enough to know what TikTok is.
So funny.
Like, your kids might be into TikTok or different things like that.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Like, I'm too old for that. I see
I
that.
just
I'm
learned
like,
a new one this weekend.
yeah, exactly. So, and so that's the thing. It's like, yeah, I'm too old for TikTok, but I know what it is.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. It's like, okay, I'm teetering like that. But, for young people in whatever it is, my age and younger, I think the podcast could be really cool for them because it's a way for learning to happen in a more engaging way than sitting in a classroom. I mean,
it's an alternative and a supplement.
Exactly. It works that way, where I really struggled in high school to sit and just have someone lecture to me. And in college, too. I mean, I was notorious for laying my head down on the desk and just kind of listening and just blankly staring off into space because I wasn't engaged with the material, because that's just not a style for me. With a podcast, you can move around, you can drive in your car, you can do whatever you want at the same time, which can let your energy out of your body if you're just a, kind of a fidgeter like I am, or if you just want to do this more on the side. I think it'll be better for young people to just let them take in information in a new way. And older people too. I mean, podcasts are becoming super popular for the car. So if you guys will enjoy us on your daily commute, that would be pretty sweet.
So do you think that even if someone doesn't understand or isn't familiar with evolutionary psychology, do you think that they will also benefit from this? So some of the topics that we'll talk about, and I guess really the perspective.
Yeah, I think so. And so to give a foreshadowing into the next episode that we are going to have an episode with Todd Shackelford, your husband, my boss, and discuss what evolutionary psychology is at its foundation.
Right.
And so if you don't know what it is, that's totally cool. We have an episode for you coming up that will explain everything.
And it's short. It's not... He sums it up because he's been doing that for a very long time.
Yeah, exactly. It's succinct. He knows the drill.
Right.
And you'll be able to understand what it is pretty simply.
Right.
It may sound like a big idea, depending on how you feel about all these things, and it may not. But Todd does a really good job of framing it so that everyone can understand.
Right.
Now, for those then, back to your question of, okay, they're not as familiar, I would still say, yeah, it is influential and helpful for people who aren't as familiar so that they can see topics they've already thought about before and then see it through a new lens.
Right.
So that you're just seeing it from someone else's perspective, whether it was just a normal political issue looking on both sides, conservative or liberal. It's just seeing it through another lens, and you'll probably learn something different and think about it in a different way than you did before. Right.
Yeah, and not the traditional men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
Yeah.
Or is it the other way around?
Right. Yeah.
It's a little more grounded and scientific. But it's easy to understand, or it can be. Right. And so I think that's one of the sort of selling points of evolutionary psychology.
Yeah.
You can understand things that come from a very complex basis, but you can get your head around things like sex differences and parent-child relationships.
Which are true. Also true. But yeah, I mean, the great thing with EP is that you can take phenomena from your daily life, and with a theory behind it, you can logically put into place why things are the way they are.
Right.
So like you're saying, for sex differences, you can have why guys seem to enjoy short-term relationships more than women. And it's like, okay, this is something that we all see throughout our lives. And you're like, God, is it just that guys are assholes? Are all guys assholes? No. And, why are they doing this? Well, because of things like parental investment, because of the sex differences of how our gametes are set up, all sorts of things. Right. And we can logically put things together rather than just say, oh, all guys are assholes.
Or their parents raised them that way.
Or right, yeah. Or it's just, oh, it's their environment. Oh,
Right.
it's because they were poor and they came out of the hood. No, it has nothing to do with that. It doesn't matter whether you're white,
Or they're super
black,
wealthy and they're
or,
just a jerk.
or wealthy, or, religious or not. It has nothing to do with that. And that's what's great about EP as well, is that the findings typically are very universal.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where you are, what your background is. This is the mental machinery that's built into our heads.
I think another important thing to point out at that point is
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the research, and I think this would be true across science, right? As psychologists, we look at averages.
Yeah,
And so,
exactly.
so yes, we find universals, but they're on average, right? Because
Yeah.
everyone knows someone who doesn't fit.
Right. I was saying the aggregators out there understand that it is all on average. This is the typical behavior.
Right.
Not
It's-
everyone does
right.
this. There are exceptions to the rule for these types of things, but the
Right,
main
on
findings
average, right,
on
exactly.
average, and you'll find it significantly.
Right. Across cultures, and
Across
especially
cultures.
with sex differences
Right.
and in specific domains.
Yeah.
Right.
And so with that, yeah, we're not saying it's everyone.
Right. And that
But-
it can't be changed or anything like that. I mean, we're
Well, and because that everyone is called evolution, change over time. So
Okay.
with the pod and the listeners and the demographic that we're shooting for, when that topic comes to mind for you, what sort of image or person comes to mind for you?
So, yeah, I think that was another thing that I struggle with. Who are the listeners exactly? But so I think that anyone who is interested in human behavior,
Yeah.
learning something about it, or connecting with people that might have, a little bit of a background in psychology, I think those kinds of people could benefit from this. And this includes, older, younger, curious minds. Yeah, so I think those are really the listeners.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And then, so I think with the older listeners particularly, I think something that I've been thinking about is that we may have others within the evolutionary psychology community or just psychology community listen to our takes and be like, whoa, 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 slow down. That's no.
Slow it down, whippersnapper.
Yeah, exactly. And they may have some serious hangups or qualms with what we're saying. And I'd like to already extend an invitation like, hey, if you have a real issue with anything we're saying or talking about, then contact us. We're very open to that. And if you want to come and discuss these issues with us or just with the diva here on your own and debate this, we would love to have you on the show, whether we actually have you here in person in the office or
video
whether we
or-
do this through Skype or anything like that. We would love to discuss any of these topics.
Right. Yeah, and so I think a lot of the topics that we'll talk about will be interesting to many types of listeners. So even topics that are not related, specifically to psychology, right? So, I mean, we could talk about cooking.
Yeah, I mean, there might be some things of
Sports.
just cooking, sports, pop culture, anything
But
that's
everything we can
relevant.
tie it right back into psychology
Yeah,
anyhow, right?
because it
sort of
all has
starts
human
there.
behavior.
Right.
I mean, everything works into with that, and I think that'll be a thing that we'll do where each episode is going to have generally a specific topic that we're going to talk about.
Of course.
So this could be typically whatever.
Sometimes sexy.
Yeah, sometimes sexy. That could be something like online dating. That's
Mm-hmm.
something that I'm really interested in studying, or maybe the mating market hypothesis, the matching hypothesis.
Right.
All sorts of things of why we're choosing the people we're choosing to date and marry or hook up with. There are logical step-by-step reasons of why we are each attracted to the people we're attracted to. So I find attraction and sex really interesting to study, and that's something our lab studies in general in the Shackelford lab. And so, yeah, it could be something like that. It could be something controversial. There's all sorts of stuff with gender fluidity, trans rights, sex differences. These are things a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know about that. I don't know if we should talk about that. We should. In fact, we should talk
Yes,
about these
sir.
things. Yeah, exactly. We should talk about these things, even if they are a little more taboo. It's still worth talking about, even if it's a hard topic.
Well, and I think using an evolutionary perspective and then using science as sort of an excuse to talk about these things, I think anything pretty much, or any topic is, grounds for discussing, right? And I think with science and again with evolutionary psychology, we do have opinions and we do have feelings because we are normal humans, right?
Right, yeah. True.
But taking it down to the science and to the fundamentals, I think allows for us to explore topics, that are more taboo or might make people uncomfortable in a way that, we're all on the same sort of, ground level.
And the other thing about it, like you're saying, it's the same ground level because the science doesn't care.
Right.
Natural selection does not care. Sexual selection doesn't care about morals, about culture, about anything of why you should feel taboo about these topics. It doesn't matter. It's a phenomena that's still happening either way. And so that's why we want to talk about it. How can we relate evolution to these current topics? I mean, I think that's something that'll be pretty interesting. And so with these topics like that, like if we had online dating, we may try and bring in a guest who is an expert in that field. Right. And, whether we have someone who comes in about hormones,
who might online date.
Yeah. Who knows? Who knows? We'll figure that out as we go, Like, again, in the next episode with Todd talking about EP, I mean, Todd himself, he'll probably be a recurring guest on this podcast to talk about.
He is an expert in the field.
Right. Yeah, an expert in the field, but some of his, topics of interest like sperm competition or homicide or interpartner violence or anything like that, where if we have that guest on, we're going to be talking with them about their research interests, and then we'll kind of hook it in.
Right.
Like, you're interested in all of it. And so the idea then is like, all right, well, this is cool, but you and I don't spend all of our time on these things.
Right.
And so it's just a fun way for us to get someone a little bit smarter than we are in those areas to come and chat for an hour.
You're speaking for yourself there.
We do have, this is the diva. This is the diva.
But one of the things that I also wanted to talk about, and I think where people are going to be interested in the things that we talk about. So you raised the issue of, sex and romantic relationships. I mean, that's a huge area where, researchers are interested, and then people outside of science and research, they are interested in sexuality and romantic relationships because that's such a huge part of our lives. So
it's just something that's happening.
We want to understand it, right?
Yeah.
So in this podcast, we are going to offer insights, a perspective that might hopefully generate some new thinking about the way our listeners approach romantic relationships
or anything. Yeah, because with psychology,
well, I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah. No. But that's the cool thing with psychology, and a lot of people think it's so intuitive, and a lot of it is. Yeah. But it's a lot more tangible than say astrophysics or chemistry, where it's like, there's chemistry in your body. You can watch a rocket take off, but most people don't understand that in the same way as attraction or other things
to their lives.
Yeah, it's not as relevant, but also this is what we're arguing for, that we have mental machinery that's programmed through evolution to inherently understand these things of this is a social process.
It's a big part of our lives.
Yeah, and you should get it, and we'll just help you all dissect how you're getting it and why the programming exists in the first place. So another thing I know about you is that you are a big feminist, and that's something for you that is an important part of your life, your thinking, your outlook. And so I know this is going to be a topic and perspective that's brought into our podcast. So could you talk to the listeners about what that means for you and some of the topics we might talk about and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so when I define myself as a feminist, it's not, male bashing and, I hate men type of thing. It's more along the lines of equal rights regardless of sex, right? And I think most people are a proponent of that sort of idea.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are that, and they just think,
They just
"Oh
don't
my
define
God,
themselves as a feminist."
I'm not a feminist," because
But-
yeah.
But I am, making it explicit because I want to also talk about topics that aren't really discussed very much. And we know in science, not because I'm blaming men or anything like that, but there are biases in the things that are researched that are more oriented towards males. And so part of my goal for this show and podcast is to talk about topics that really don't get as much exposure, at least from a scientific evolutionary perspective, in a way that I think will be useful to people. So, of course, there are those podcasts where people are male bashing and, the patriarchy, this and that, and so forth, right?
Kind of thing.
And there's a platform for that, and there are people listening to that. But for people that would like to take seriously, women's, issues, so like female sexuality, that's something that really isn't talked about very much in an explicit way. It's more of, women are victims and men are perpetrators type of perspective.
Right.
And so this will bring, hopefully, female sexual behavior and also just sexuality in general. It's, more of an active position. And then another area that I think is important with regard to, the females is looking at adolescence, especially from an evolutionary perspective,
Right.
that female psychology doesn't happen at, 19, it begins
It's happening
a lot earlier, right?
Yeah, it's happening much earlier. And yeah, it's something to think about, and we'll constantly frame things of, hey, we have to take this back to an ancestral world, the ancestral state. And yeah, you better have some things going on upstairs when you're living outside.
Oh, absolutely.
You have to be able to figure some things out, or you're not going to make it, because you don't have a ton of time to do anything.
Yeah, and so in adolescents and seniors, right? Because you don't die right away, after having
into
kids.
Senescence, there's
that there is life after 50 and so forth.
And humans particularly have a much longer life after reproduction than other species.
Yeah, and so even in our lab, there's some cool research coming out looking at sexuality in older age. So it's kind of, interesting. So shedding some light on that kind of stuff. And then also women's health in general. And another area that's starting to sort of pick up is pregnancy sickness and looking at that from a psychological perspective. Right. Of course, there's research on, from a medical perspective, but in terms of psychology, we can shed some light on topics like that as well from my feminist perspective.
Yeah, but like you're saying, it's just, this is a platform to then talk about some of those
I think in
issues.
A healthy way, right?
Yeah, exactly. We'll just talk about what we know and what is currently available to us through science. And we'll also give some speculation on some things of what we think, or where we think the field may go, or where
where it needs to go.
where it needs to go, or what we think is likely the answer. If we just extrapolate, put some things together, and we'll pose these as questions like, hey, if you are a researcher and you find this interesting, steal our ideas, take them, run with them. Get a hold of us, like, hey, why did you think about that?
Right.
Or if you even just get inspired and you want to run with it, then run with it.
Another topic that actually somebody on Facebook posted that they want to hear about is like work-home balance, right? That seems to be more of a female issue. Not that males don't struggle with that as well, but I mean, the reality is the reality.
It's been assumed that, men have to go to work and come home and do all this, and then,
I don't think men actually seek balance. No, just kidding.
Well,
just kidding.
I mean, some don't. I mean, some, and that's something for academics that the stigma can really get stick. Oh, they're just workaholics. That's all they do. They're real, they're terrible hangs outside of work. They're just old and stuffy, and you're like, yeah, well, some are for sure, but again, it's the average thing.
I'm definitely stuffy, so.
But see, like I think about this too, as like you're saying, with work-home balance, and even for me as a graduate student, I have a number of high schoolers that I'll work with when I volunteer at the hospital, and they will ask me all the time, like, well, what do you do? like, what are you up to? Like, how did you
Wait,
how
what
did
are you
get
doing at
into
the hospital?
So I volunteer at the Troy Beaumont Hospital in Troy, Michigan,
Okay.
and I'm on the orthopedics floor, and so I am what is called a volunteer companion. So I will help the nurses and nursing assistants on hourly rounds. I'll talk to patients, bring them water, just talk with them. There are a lot of old ladies in for hip replacements and things, and frankly, when you're stuck in a bed for just days on end, you get pretty bored, except when you have to get up for PT, and that hurts because physical therapy is generally painful for anyone going through it. And so, yeah, I just volunteer doing that because my goal is to get into medical school, and so I'm trying to get some patient care hours, see what the hospital's like on a day-to-day basis.
Do you see yourself in a hospital setting?
Yeah, I think it's pretty nice. I like the structure. I like how structured it is on a day-to-day. But
And you like interacting with the patients?
Yeah, that's the best part because you actually get to see what's going on.
Right.
And so with the high schoolers that are there also as volunteers, they're asking me all the time what I'm doing, how did I get here, what did you do to study to get into college, what did you do in college? And so I think it's important for you too as someone where you're at the final end of it. Where it's like
What's final?
Final, you have the job.
I'd
Not final
hardly
end
say
like
that it's final.
Well, it's for a lot of people and younger people, having a professor position is the goal. That is the end of the road for them.
Jeez, it sounds.
Well, yeah. So for you, if you guys are listening to this already, it's not
the end of the road.
I mean, it's not like you're dying out here, but it's just you've made it to.
I feel really sick right now. I'm just kidding.
Well, that's a you thing. That is a career path decision on your end. And if you need to speak about the regrets and hardships of this as we go,
regrets.
then, we'll get to that.
It's brought me here. Absolutely no regret.
Well, there we go. So that's the thing. But, I think this will be helpful still in work-home balance. And we'll talk about this.
Right.
One idea we've had is bringing some other professional moms to come in and talk about how do you manage having a handful of kids, however many pets they might have, a job, a social life. How do you do it? Just so that other people can see, I have the same thing going on at home.
I hope they're not looking for a magic answer.
Well, and that's the thing. There isn't a magic answer. It's just something to say hey, people would look at you as, oh, you're someone who's successful. You have a high status job. You have what, surface level to others would seem like a really happy, fun life and what they would want. And then to hear from you that you do the same things like they do. Oh, I forgot my keys again this morning. The other week,
3 days in a row, actually.
the other day you spilled coffee on the wall in here in front of me. We do the.
We're not recording this, right?
Yeah, we do the same things that everyone else does.
Right.
We just happen to do this sort of work as a career.
Yeah.
It doesn't make us any different, but we do want to pull back the curtain and say, hey, this is a look into our lives of what grad school is like, what academia is like, and how we manage having a social life, different things like that. So someone with a social life, just having fun.
Yeah.
So,
well, this is fun too, though, right?
Right, and that's for us, this is a fun way for us to get our academic ideas out there. Yeah. I mean, that was another reason for me wanting to do the podcast. Is it's a publication where you can bring your interests and thoughts to the table and say, hey, I believe in this. This is what I think. What do you guys think?
And it's. I mean, in some ways, I see it as a level of public service education, right? But we're doing it with our twist, basically.
Yeah.
Right. Sharing some of the knowledge again, like I mentioned in the intro. Mm-hmm. Just breaking down those walls and sharing it on a larger platform.
Yeah.
So I know that we kind of talked a little bit about some topics that we'll talk about, but would you say from your executive producing mind, are there any topics that you think, we won't cover?
See, that's the thing. I think we're pretty much going to try and go for it all at some point. Now, I'm definitely going to be pushing your boundaries and buttons of like, let's do it. And I think we're going to have a number of meetings where you're like, I don't know about that. But we do want to cover a variety of things, including the taboo topics. Again, whether we end up talking about orgasms or, rape or interpersonal violence, homicide, or other more not as, really out there things. Yeah, just trans rights or, homosexuality or things like that, where they are everyday things you see in the real world. Like, we pretty much all know someone who's gay.
Right.
That's not a problem. It's not weird. In fact, we can even look into some of the homosexuality stats of animals to show that even animals perform these behaviors too. Right. It's not a just us thing. So, yeah, we'll try and cover all sorts of things, have fun, laugh at it. I know you're going to have some real laughs or cringes at points of just uh-oh.
I think as long as we do it with tasteful zest, then I think... then I think anything is game. No, but seriously, I think that if you're really interested in progress, and I mean like scientific progress, then I think we have to ask those painful questions.
Yeah, because
we might not get it right as we say it, right? But
whoever
the only
did.
way to get better, right, is in having these kinds of conversations about whatever the topic may be that is controversial. We have. I mean, we'll get better if we keep having conversation.
And the other thing is
that's our goal: progress, not insult, injury.
Yeah, we're not gonna get to the answer per se, but a lot of the taboo behind taboo topics is the unknown factor. Yeah, right. When you don't know things, it's much scarier than when you do know them. Right. And so, if we can bring that even to people's attention, like, hey, this is actually, to the best of our knowledge, what it is. If it still bothers you, well, keep looking. And if not, well, we're sorry for giving you a really hard topic to think about. But, that's not the worst thing that can happen to you, is to have to think pretty hard for a little while. In fact, that's probably good for you.
So anything is game.
Yeah, anything is game.
All right. Well, I hope I don't regret saying that.
I'm not afraid. I am not afraid.
I'm not afraid either.
And another thing for you guys as listeners is if you have topics that you're really geeking out about, or you found even through something like a BuzzFeed article, you're like, that's pretty cool. Feel free to get a hold of us on any of our social network platforms.
That would be great, actually.
Going to the @Darwinian Diva. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter, Instagram. We have a YouTube page.
Yep.
Just reach us in the comments section and ask about what you want. I mean,
Tell us what you want.
Tell us what you want to hear about. Otherwise, we're going to go off of our own interests and try and meld it with you guys'. But if you have topics where you're like, man, that would be pretty sweet to know more about, even if it is crazy, bring it to our attention. We'll see what we can do about it.
It's got to pass the Zach test.
Yeah, if I find it interesting and relevant, then you can make it on. And we'll bring up who you are as well. We'll be like, oh, yeah, this is John Smith from Denver, Colorado.
Though.
Well, yeah, then it's anonymous. Then it's just like, hey, this is, sent to the mailbag. And, we thought this was a great idea. It's something to think about. And then we're going to make it happen. That's our idea. So for you then... Okay, everyone's listened this far.
Okay.
And this is, we're getting toward the end of the pod for today.
Okay.
So when a listener's getting to this part of the pod, whether it's 45 minutes, an hour, whatever, we'll see. That'll be another thing, everyone. The time of each episode will always be variable. Mm-hmm. What are some things...
I like that, always variable.
Yeah,
got plenty of wiggle room there.
Yeah, we're not like an NBC production here.
Right,
we're not just... We get to do whatever we want. That's another cool thing about academia, everyone, is you're busy, but you can usually have the freedom to do what you want. Yep. So what are two things that you think people should walk away with after they listen to an episode of Darwinian Diva?
Well, what I'm hoping is that they are thinking about whatever the topic was in a different way, or at least, have... even if it was momentary, while they were listening, they had a moment of thinking about that topic differently, or saying, hey, yeah, well, maybe, and if they come full circle, no, forget it.
Yeah.
I
That's fine.
consider that a win. I'll take
Yeah.
the W there.
Yep.
Right. And then I'd say the other thing I'd want them to walk away with is that longing for some more,
Yeah.
some more of Darwinian Diva.
Please come back. Please, 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 please. It's just like, yeah, I mean, that would be,
A longing.
yeah, just for more information. I think
Yeah.
I think my two things would be, to make them really have to think about something.
Yeah.
Because I
have that strategy in my classroom. Like, I just
Yeah.
need one person. I want at least one person in the classroom to, be impacted by the things that I'm talking about or teaching.
Yeah, just
and
to
then
make
my job is done.
right, just to make them have something to be curious about.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a big thing for me, is just getting people to think about things that they normally wouldn't be thinking about. Right. And then the other thing for me is just so that they can get an insight into, again, seeing what this career is like in general, so that if you do find this really interesting, guess what? It is attainable.
Yep.
Like wherever you are in your life, if all of a sudden this is something extremely interesting, there's a path to get there. And if you ever want to get a hold of us to talk about this, then again, reach out and we can make that happen. So those are my goals. And then we're just going to laugh a lot together. You all as listeners,
Yes.
you're going to, there eventually might be a blooper reel, but, we laugh a lot as we make this, and it's
Yes.
just a lot of fun for us coming in, doing this pretty much every week, twice a week kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we'll just
I
keep
think that's
putting
one
it out
of
there
my
for you guys.
goals too. And I can't remember if I've already said that, but, it's okay to make mistakes and laugh a little bit along the way. Let's just take it easy.
Yeah, even though we're called professionals as scientists.
We are, though.
Well, we are professionals, but you can goof around and still be
Yes.
a professional.
Right.
That's the thing.
Yeah,
It's
and there's
professional because you're getting paid to do it.
Appropriate professionalism. That's,
Yeah.
That's,
Well, that's
kind of
the-
the route.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
And I don't
So-
like labels, but there you have
No,
it.
yeah. And so that's the thing. So we're, really happy to wrap up episode 1, pilot episode of Darwinian Diva.
Yeah, thanks for expanding your mind and coming on here and sharing your
doing what we're
your
doing.
thoughts.
Yeah, so I'm Zach Sundin. This is
Darwinian Diva.
the Diva, and we will catch you on the next episode with Todd Shackelford.
Yep.
And until then, again, if you have any sort of requests, get a hold of us on social media.
Yep.
Hit us in the comment section below if you're watching any of the clips on YouTube. And, we'll see you next time.